everyone. Welcome to the show. It is Friday, and oh, man, holy Dinah, what a Friday it has been. Diddy is going to prison, and I don't think he was expecting it. Reason I'm saying that is because he was booking speaking engagements for next week in Miami. Yeah, who does that? It's the height of hubris, isn't it? Oh, don't take my word for it. Those were the words of the prosecutors saying, "Are you kidding me?" That's the kind of thing a prosecutor's like, thank you, that's a gift when we're going into sentencing, because they used it. They used it against him, and they said to the judge, here's a dude who's so confident he's going to walk out of here today, he thinks he's got business in Florida next week. Not so much. And wait until you hear and see some of the infomercial video that Diddy played in court today, highly produced. Like, when I say highly produced, this thing was like, you know, solid MTV stuff. Paragon of Virtue, you'll hear all about it, you'll see it. Man, yeah, that's what $1 billion will get you. You can produce just about anything. But let me put it to you this way. It is no picnic being in a federal prison, you know, for 50 months. It's not going to be 50 months. He's got time served. He's got 15% for good time. It's like 2 more years, okay? It's no picnic spending 2 more years in a federal prison. And I'm sure there are a lot of people out there who are really pissed that Diddy got any prison time at all. But there are a lot of people who think it's not enough. Going to talk about all that in just a moment. And I'm going to tell you right now, this is the 30-year anniversary today of O.J. Simpson's not guilty verdict. You know where you were. I know where I was because I was a recent immigrant to this country. I had just arrived here, and this was my first big assignment. OJ. I was not in Kansas anymore, or Canada. And I'll tell you something. I'm looking at this through 3 decades of prisms. And there is someone I wanted to ask about this so much, given what happened with Diddy today, and that's Kim Goldman. Kim Goldman's going to join me on the show in just a moment. She's Ron Goldman's sister. She was in that courtroom, nearly collapsed when she heard not guilty. Look at that face. I wonder where he would be today had he lived, right? 30 years without Ron is the way we should really say it. 30 years without Nicole. Kim's going to talk to me in just a moment about where we've come in those 30 years when it comes to the abuse of women, right? The abuse and the killing of women and men, domestic assaults and abuse. Are we better? What does that verdict in the Diddy case tell us? That's coming in just a moment. Also, I don't know if you were here on Monday. We told you about Laken Snelling, the pregnant cheerleader who's now charged with having had a baby in her room that she shares in the house with her college roommates, and putting that baby in a bag, a garbage bag with the cleaning supplies, and sticking that baby in the closet, only for her roommates and the police to have found the baby dead. She is not charged with murder or any homicide at all yet. It still could happen. But we gave you the headlines on Monday that she was found to have taken selfies during labor. And the headlines are really big and scathing. People are saying things like, how the hell, right? There's something you might need to pump the brakes on there, because thinking through it, there is quite a theory as to why she may have had to. I'm going to explain that in just a moment. But let me start here, shall we? October 3rd was one of the biggest days in true crime history, long before Sean Diddy Combs faced the music in federal court today. It's been a big anniversary for 30 years. On this date, in 1995, a jury in Los Angeles found O.J. Simpson not guilty of murdering his ex-wife, Nicole Brown Simpson, and Nicole's friend, Ron Goldman. It was the verdict that rocked the nation, both for and against O.J. And frankly, we're still coming to grips with what O.J. taught us about fame and power and justice. I can't wait to talk about all of this with the person who carries that trial and that verdict in her heart every single day, Kim, Ron's sister. She's going to be with me live in just a moment, and she may have something to say about how far we've come in 30 years when it comes to punishing domestic abusers, because a judge just handed Sean Diddy Combs 50 months in federal prison this afternoon. It's just over 4 years. And it must have come as quite a surprise to Diddy, because he was already booking speaking engagements in Miami for next week. Those ain't going to happen. And I've got more on that in just a minute. But first, the judge brought down the hammer on Diddy today. Although make no mistake, 50 months was no sledgehammer, just a hammer, and one that Diddy obviously didn't see coming. It was sentencing day for 2 counts of violating the Mann Act, basically ferrying people across state lines for the purpose of prostitution. Remember, Diddy skated on the more serious RICO and sex trafficking charges last summer, but he is going to pay for these 2 guilty verdicts. The feds were pushing for more than 11 years, but Team Diddy asked for no more than 14 months. And since he's already been locked up for just over 12, it would have given him, I guess, a couple of weeks to go pack up his cell at the Brooklyn Detention Center before resuming his life and moving freely about the cabin. The 50-month sentence, though, means 4 years, 2 months. And given credit for time served, plus, let's just say, good behavior, if he can accrue it, he's looking at a little over 2 years in a federal penitentiary somewhere, although we don't know yet which one or where. It's honestly really too bad that federal proceedings aren't televised, because there was some pretty salty stuff that went on today in Diddy's courtroom. His lawyers insisted that those freak-offs were no more than consensual adult activities. But the judge blasted back, saying that was, quote, flatly inconsistent with both reality and acceptance of responsibility. To be fair, Diddy did take some responsibility today, finally. Though he never said a word at trial, today he begged the judge for mercy, calling his past behavior disgusting and shameful and sick. He said he's lost his career, his business, and his reputation, but apparently not his family, because Diddy's 6 grown children spoke up for him in court briefly. And the defense team played a not-so-brief and highly produced video portraying their client as a doting father and generous mentor, basically an all-around paragon of virtue, as I mentioned. Diddy sobbed in court as that infomercial played. Here is just a little snippet.
When my baby cries.
We gotta give her a bottle then.
Know that you mean something to people. Know that you mean something to people, like you live somewhere in people's heart.
My nose fell off! Ah! No, my lip fell off!
I just got so excited because this is truly a dream come true for me. And I'm happy to say this is our 3rd school we have opened. It's official.
And about all those personal appearances that Diddy thought he would be at next week in Florida, quote, the height of hubris, prosecutor called it. I'm joined now by a veteran of a similar case, well after OJ's, but before the feds came for Diddy. Nadia Shihata was the federal prosecutor for one of 2 cases that put R. Kelly, where he is, in prison tonight. Nadia, good to have you back. 4 years. Reaction?
You know, I'm not surprised by the sentence. I think it's a fair sentence, given that he wasn't convicted of the most serious charges, certainly more than what the defense was expecting, but I actually think it was a good day for the defense ultimately.
What do you think about that video? Because I'm hearing a lot of people who thought it was appalling and others who thought, well, that's who he is.
I mean, it felt a little like a campaign video of sorts. I'm not sure it was a good move for a federal sentencing proceeding. It could have backfired. Very slickly produced, as you noted. And it kind of showed us the Diddy we thought we knew before this case all started. So that juxtaposition between what we saw in the video and what the judge heard in a 6-week trial, I'm not sure it was helpful to his sentencing appeal.
Normally, I look down and I quote verbatim when I quote somebody, especially a federal judge, but I can't do that right now because I can't say some of the words that the federal judge said today. And I was super astounded, and I wanted to run that past you. Judge Subramanian said, basically, quote, you put a pill in Jane's mouth and you told her to get out there and suck this, and if not, F that, and I don't care. And I just sort of wondered, is that normal in federal court to hear a judge say those things?
It's not normal, but this is not a normal case. And that's, you know, what the evidence presented at trial showed. So it's not crazy that he would, you know, make that point, particularly in giving the reasoning behind his sentencing, but certainly unusual to hear that kind of language in a federal court.
So one thing I do want to ask you about, and that is procedure here. And I don't want to get boring, so I'll just use lay people's terms. Correct me if I make mistakes. But basically, at the beginning of the hearing, the judge effectively said that he was going to use all of the evidence that was shown at trial. when he decided, the time of, the sentencing, the amount of sentencing he was going to hand over to Diddy, and that included a lot of the evidence that didn't lead to a conviction. Is it all fair in love and war when it comes to a big trial where the charges are all in one proceeding?
It is. Judges have immense discretion in federal sentencing procedures to take into account all relevant conduct, whether that has to do with the history and characteristics of the defendant or the totality of not only the offense conduct, but even uncharged conduct and acquitted conduct, which the judge did take some account of here. Certainly it factored into his decision-making. He found that the sexual acts were not just a matter between two consenting adults, that this involved coercion, that there was physical violence, that there was blackmail with the threats to release videos. And that's all fair game under the law as it stands right now. Judges can and do regularly consider the totality, including acquitted conduct.
So this is Mark Agnifilo outside the courthouse today, and that's Diddy's attorney. Let's play that.
There was no sex trafficking. There was no racketeering. Everything was consensual. Everything was adult, which is why he was convicted only of the prostitution offense. What we feel happened today was that the judge acted as a 13th juror, one that we did not choose, and that he second-guessed the jury's verdict.
So basically, Nadia, two questions in one. Is there some ground here for appealing, and how much time do you think Diddy's really going to serve?
So look, I expect them to appeal. Any good defense attorney would, but I think they are going to be hard-pressed to be successful on appeal. At the end of the day, the judge gave a below-guideline sentence. It's going to be very hard to argue that that was unreasonable. And whether the defense wants to call him the 13th juror or not, the law permits the judge to take into account all of the conduct that he did. There's nothing improper about that. So I don't think they're going to be successful on appeal ultimately. As far as the time he's ultimately going to do, as you mentioned, he's going to get credit for good time, assuming he behaves himself in jail. He's also potentially eligible for some further reductions under the First Step Act if he participates successfully in various programs while in prison. So that's why I think it was ultimately a good day for the defense. He's probably going to serve, 2 years, maybe even less than that. Given what he was facing at the beginning of this, which was life in prison, that is a good outcome for Diddy.
He's lucky. Nadia Shehata, thank you so much for this. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
All right, for the young folks in the crowd, believe it or not, there was a time when television was the dominant force in culture. And by dominant, I mean that when a jury returned a verdict in the O.J. Simpson double murder trial 30 years ago today, it was a trial that had dragged on for 8 agonizing months. And on this day, about 150 million people tuned in. That is over half of the U.S. population back then. Oprah even covered it live with a studio audience. You could see that audience, right? Not everybody clapping. Half and half. Trial was a national spectacle start to finish, but at the center and often overlooked were 2 innocent people whom O.J. Simpson was responsible for killing, an act of domestic violence. Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman were his victims. Their families wanted justice, and they still do today after all these years. Kim Goldman is Ron Goldman's sister and my special guest on this somber anniversary. Kim, thank you so much for being here today. Still can't believe that it's been 30 years, and I often wonder how it is for you, day in, day out. People might let this slip from their minds, but I don't think you do.
I don't. Thank you for having me and bringing the topic to light. I think it's timely that we are having this conversation the same day that Diddy had his sentencing, especially during Domestic Violence Awareness Month. I've always thought that was a little bit poetic. It was also October 3rd that he was found guilty of his Vegas kidnapping charges also. So there's a lot of energy around this day. It's hard. It's hard watching that video. My hands are sweating. I don't know why I still anticipate that a different verdict is going to come, even though I've watched it God knows how many times over the years. But it's hard. It's a moment in time that really solidified the rest of my journey in this world. And it secured a place in my heart of wanting to make sure that I was advocating for victims and survivors as much as I could. So
let's talk about that. I said it off the top of this show. The judge brought down a hammer, not a sledgehammer, but it's a hammer. And I wonder how you feel. Is it, God, here we are, 30 years, we're making some progress?
I think there is some progress. I think, for the victims to testify and to bring the truth to light, I think that, when you bring celebrity and power together and try to mix it with the complexities of this case, maybe the holding him accountable just couldn't come to fruition. It showed us that it didn't put him above the law. Maybe just held him right at bay. Maybe this will shift the narrative slightly on how we talk about victims and survivors and abuse, and take it seriously when people bring those allegations towards people in power.
Well, let me read for you, speaking of that, what Judge Subramanian actually said from the bench, because I thought this was pretty profound and I want to get your reaction to it. The judge said, I want to speak to the strong women who came forward. Ms. Ventura and Jane, you've been through trauma we can't imagine. Ms. Ventura said it was forced sex and degradation. I want to say we heard you. You weren't just speaking to the jurors, but to other victims. You stood up to power. Those aren't just words, that's the record. This is a federal proceeding, and we just don't often hear something this strong worded. And the fact that Judge Subramanian used the evidence from the trial to sentence in the 2 charges that he was convicted of. What are your thoughts?
My thoughts are, I was listening to I'm blanking on his name, the attorney that was out front saying that he was found not guilty. It didn't happen. Well, not guilty doesn't mean that harm. Yeah, not guilty doesn't mean that harm didn't occur. Not guilty doesn't mean that the crimes weren't committed. It just means that it didn't, rise to the level that it needed to come back with a conviction. So I think it's important for people to understand that victims and survivors don't control the law. They don't control reasonable doubt. The only thing that they can control is their own truth and their own ability to come forward with it and brace themselves for the attack and the re-victimization and the trauma that continues as they try to bring it to the forefront so that people can continue to talk about abuse and bring awareness to it. And I applaud them. The same way I feel about the Jeffrey Epstein victims. It's really hard to go up against people that have millions and millions of dollars to be able to silence you and to keep chugging along. So I'm very proud of them.
Yeah, speaking of that, I'm going to have to do this all from memory, and it was several months ago, which at this age is hard for me. But, Cassie testified that she was thrown into a bed frame. There were pictures of her with a terrible wound where she got stitches and plastic surgery and was holed up in a hotel and not allowed to see anyone until she healed. There was a witness, one of the escorts said that there was all sorts of fighting going on in the other room, and when they came back out, Diddy said, now finish strong, and he was so appalled by it he lost his erection. So this is proof that something awful happened and there was force. When I asked one of the jurors about that, they seemed confounded. I said, isn't that proof there was forced sex, coerced sex? And they seemed confused. And I just wondered if you think this whole celebrity, shiny thing in the courtroom made it hard sometimes for these jurors to actually come to a verdict of guilty on the sex trafficking and the RICO.
Yeah, I think that, as I said, that the power and celebrity, when you mix it with really complex, cases and, RICO, I'm not an attorney, but I understand that RICO cases are very hard to prove. It's very hard to have probably shown that he was, the CEO of a big organization that was, organizing all of these sex crimes. I mean, it really, I don't understand it. Listen, the jurors in our case didn't think that domestic violence would lead to murder. So it is very hard to understand in the mind of a juror and having to, sift through all of the evidence and sift through all of those things that you have decided in your brain make sense. And then when they're shown in a different light, they suddenly get a little cloudy. And it's very hard to be able to dismantle the power and dismantle the imbalance of power. I would love to serve as a juror. It will never happen for me, unfortunately. But I'm disappointed that it didn't get to the level that it could have. But again, I think, not guilty doesn't mean that harm didn't happen. And I think we can continue to have this conversation for years to come and hope that we continue to talk about it in a way that makes it safer for people to come forward.
The last time I talked to your dad, I asked him, I think it was about an anniversary that was coming up of something. And he said, I think of these anniversaries more as X number of years without Ron. And so I just wanted to ask you, how are you guys doing? How do you mark these really sad days?
I mark these sad days with honoring the people that are my support system, honoring my brother, showering my fiance, my son, my animals with love, my father. I pour my heart into my work. I'm the chair of I'm a board member for the National Center of Victims of Crime. We're celebrating 40 years of serving victims and survivors across the country. I've been a nonprofit for 30 years. I'm a VP of development for a healthcare facility here in Los Angeles. I write, I speak, I travel, I learn as much as I can to be as big of an advocate as I can. And I lean on the people that have been so wonderful to me and my family, but also across the country. And, I do my very best to be the best sister that I can for my brother, who is the most important person in my life next to the remaining family members that I have. So every day is a new day and a new challenge. And grief is a difficult process 30 years later. It is beautiful, and it's a way for me to honor my brother. And this is another opportunity to do that. So thank you.
You're a saint. Please give my love to your dad. And thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Ashleigh. Appreciate it.
It's good to see you. Kim Goldman speaking to us on this 30th anniversary of probably the worst day of her life, next to learning that she lost her brother. We have to stop down for just a quick minute, but stay with me, because after a break, we're going to hear from somebody who knows exactly what Diddy is going through tonight. Because as a capo in one of New York's richest and most ruthless mafia families, he went through it too, from indictment to conviction to federal prison, all in the media spotlight. So what is next for Diddy? The step-by-step. And will prison time actually help his career when he gets out? That's next. By now, you know that Sean Diddy Combs is headed to prison. Federal prison, the big house. We don't know which big house yet. Don't know precisely for how long. Maybe 2 more years if he keeps his nose clean. He was sentenced today to 4 years and 2 months, but he's been in custody since September of last year, so he'll get credit for that. And he could get 15% of that knocked off, too, if he's good. Either way, wheels are in motion to place Diddy somewhere in the federal system. And not many of us know how those wheels turn or what goes through the prisoner's head at a time like this. But my next guest sure does. Michael Franzese is a former capo for the Colombo crime family, and in the mid-1980s, Fortune magazine called him one of the 50 most wealthy and powerful mafia bosses. Then his fortunes turned, and he got caught. After prison, they turned again, and I'm happy to say Michael is with us again live tonight. Hey, Michael, thanks for being here. You were the first person I thought of today when I was trying to get my head into Diddy's head. He was not expecting to get time because he was making bookings, appearances next week in Miami. What is going through his head, do you think, right now, as he just heard, okay, you're stuck in this boat and you're going to go to another boat for at least 2 more years?
Well, I think his attorneys had to be realistic. There was no way he was walking away with time served on something like this. I had figured he was going to get 5 years, so I was pretty close. But, obviously he's disappointed, although he really shouldn't be. I think, a 4-year sentence here with already credit for the year or so that he has in, I think he did very well with respect to all of the drama and all of the circumstance around this trial. There was a lot of bad stuff out there, and I'm not saying, I'm not passing judgment on that, but it just looked really bad, and he could have gotten up to 10 years or 11 years. So I think the judge, took everything into consideration. I think his family today made a very good plea for him, and I think he did very well. That's my opinion.
So in your experience, like your own experience and other, inmates that you've seen go through it and then show back up at the, the cell block, how do they take this? Do they bury their head in the pillow and cry, or do they keep their head held high and just pack up their stuff and wait for their assigned new prison? Like, tell me everything.
Well, everybody's different. I'm sure he went back was somewhat disappointed. So he's probably, dwelling on that. Hey, it could have been differently. Maybe I should have gotten out. Maybe he's a little bit upset, a little bit angry. I get it. All those emotions come into play. But right now, he's got to get ready. He'll spend a couple of weeks there until they designate him to a new facility. And he'll be a lot better off in prison than he is in the federal jail. At least there you can move around and you got some freedom on the yard and things like that. My thought is he'll collect himself, get himself together. There are ways for him to improve himself. They have the Bureau of Prisons now has a drug program. And if you're allowed to get into that drug program, you can knock as much as 18 months off your sentence. Now, I don't know if he'll qualify, if they'll allow him to go in, but he'll probably start to think about, okay, what can I do to reduce my time now? That's what everybody thinks when you get in there. Is there any way we can better ourselves? He's thinking about what facility they're going to send him to. I'm sure he spoke to his lawyers and he asked his lawyers to put in a facility that's close to his home, close to his family, a low or medium level. I don't think he'll get into a camp.
Oh, can you though? Does your request actually count? I mean, I thought the feds just put you where it works for them. I didn't think you get a say in it.
Well, here's the thing. You could ask the judge to recommend. The Bureau of Prisons doesn't have to go along with the judge's recommendation, but it does help a little bit. They do try to sometimes satisfy the judge's request. You can put in a request. And sometimes they'll honor it, sometimes they won't. It's really up to them. They're not bound by anything at that point in time. So, but he's wondering now, hoping which facility he gets into. I don't think he'll get into a camp only because he's high profile. Even though his sentence qualifies him for a camp, it's a low security, sentence. But my feeling is he'll get into at least a medium because he's so high profile.
Is the camp the lowest security and therefore more paddle and tennis and all the other things and what they call Club Fed or Camp Cupcake?
Yeah, they moved me to a camp by accident at one point, and there's no fences or anything like that. And I wasn't there for too long because they realized they made a mistake and put me back in the medium security. But they tell you when you get there, listen, there's no fences. If you want to leave, you can leave. But when we catch you, we're going to add another 5 years onto your sentence. And while I was in that camp for 2 months, each month somebody ran away. I mean, they always try to do that. But yeah, he's thinking of that. Yeah, he's thinking of that. But, a medium security is not that bad.
Let me quickly go back, though. Go back to that piece about he's high profile, so he won't get a camp. Why wouldn't he? I thought in a camp, nobody's going to shank him because, again, they want out.
The overriding factor there, I believe, is he's a guy with a lot of money. And I'll tell you, this happened to me when I went in there because of the profile I had, because of the way they wrote me up. I had everybody and their brother inmate trying to do a deal with me when I got out, a business deal. They need money. Because of the fact that he's a money guy, I think he's going to have more friends than he will enemies. And in a medium security, normally nobody's looking to shank you. When you get into the higher institutions, when people are doing, a ton of time and there's no way you can benefit them, then you got a little more problem. But in a medium security, I don't think he'll have an issue at all. I really don't. He can be too much of a benefit to inmates that are always looking for something. And he could be a golden ticket for some people, at least in their mind.
I could just talk to you for hours and hours, but I have some other guests lined up, so I got to say bye there. But Michael Francis, thank you so much for being on again. I really appreciate it.
All right. Thanks for having me. Take care.
You too. By the way, folks, Michael's book is called From Godfather to God the Father. Pick it up, have a read. Lots and lots of other people have. All right, still to come, whatever your reaction was to hearing that Diddy's going to go to a federal prison for at least the next 2 years, I'll bet it pales in comparison to the feeling all those jurors got who spent 8 weeks looking at and listening to some of the raunchiest homemade porn ever made. How do you suppose those jurors are reacting to Diddy's 50 months? I'm going to ask one of them because he's live with me next. But now the whole world has heard a whole lot more about Diddy than most of us ever wanted to hear about Diddy, including all the greasy stuff, right? And we've all formed our own opinions too, right? At trial, of course, the only opinions that mattered were those in the jury box, and we know where those landed. And then came sentencing, where only one opinion mattered, and that was the judge's. But I cannot stop wondering how Diddy's jury feels about the judge's sentence. My next guest was an alternate on Diddy's panel, and while he didn't help decide Sean Combs' fate, he saw every last bit of that evidence, and he heard all of the witnesses and all of the arguments and all of those tapes. He just goes by a first name, understandably. George, welcome back to the show. It's nice to have you, and we will keep your last name under wraps. I can imagine it's probably been a lot since trial. Can I just ask you for your reaction to that sentence today? 50 months, $500,000 in fine, and 5 years supervised release. What do you think?
Yeah, no, it wasn't exactly what I had hoped for, but I understand how the judge got there, and I am glad that justice was served in the end.
Well, what were you hoping for?
I was hoping a little bit more of like in line with what the federal guidelines were. Yeah, maybe 5-6 years around there. I know the judge gave it a little bit less. So kind of in the middle, I was kind of hoping for, but still, this is I'm glad that there is some justice and that Sean Combs is going to be having some jail time.
Yeah, I mean, I said at the beginning of the show, I said that the judge brought down a hammer, but he did not bring down a sledgehammer, just a hammer. Maybe that's a good description of where some people feel about this case. I did want to ask you about what we discovered today during sentencing. The prosecutors told the judge that Sean Combs had booked speaking engagements for Miami next week, and the prosecutor said that was the ultimate in hubris. What were your thoughts about that?
No, I would say so too. I mean, I'm not entirely sure how he would even do that, because even if it was the 14 months, still that would be, I think, towards the end of the year. So I'm not sure what he was really thinking on that. But yeah, it does show the arrogance that he thought that he would just get off on this. But I know that, but it didn't happen that way.
Yeah, arrogance is definitely another word for it. I'm also sort of thinking the stupidity, it just seemed crazy to be doing something like that, especially since it got into the hands of the prosecutors and they were allowed to use it in that sentencing hearing. Let me ask you this. Diddy wrote a letter to the judge in which he professed that he was a changed man. Do you, having heard all of that evidence and seen all of those tapes and seen him in court and spent 2+ months of your life adjudicating, what was going to happen to him, do you believe he's a changed man?
I would hope so. He did say that, but he did say this in the past too. I remember, during the trial, reading the text messages and the voice messages. He kept apologizing, saying, "Sorry, this is not going to happen again. I'm not going to do this," and it did happen again. So I would hope now that he's learned his lesson and that he is a changed man, but I don't really know. But I would hope so. His children, I know from listening today, his children said, he's a changed man, but I hope so, but I'm not sure exactly.
Yeah, well, we'll see if he becomes an even more changed man after having to serve more time at a federal institution somewhere to be determined. George, thank you so much for this. I always like to say thank you so much for your service as well. It isn't easy being a juror on a high-profile trial, as is evidenced by you saying, just use my first name, please, not last. But from all of us, we really appreciate you doing that great citizenry and being a juror. I encourage everyone to do it when you get your summons. Thank you, George.
Thank you for having me. Good to see you again. Take care.
You too. And I will repeat that. I get my summons and I immediately am excited about it. And Kim Goldman said she'd never serve on a jury, more than likely because of who she is. I feel the same way, and I'm always sad about it because I want to get picked. Still ahead tonight, New Jersey prosecutors moved at breakneck speed to charge a 17-year-old boy with murder after his Jeep rammed 2 girls on their bikes, killing them. And part of the reason may be that Jeep was moving at breakneck speed itself. As police say, it aimed for those girls. Wait until you hear just how fast that Jeep was going. That's next. The screaming headlines out of Cranford, New Jersey this week are those first-degree murder charges filed against the 17-year-old boy who allegedly rammed his Jeep into 2 17-year-old girls on their bikes. Almost immediately, the boy was charged with 2 counts of premeditated murder. Murder in the first degree. which is pretty shocking, considered most of us just thought it was a hit and run, not a planned murder. And we've been wondering what the police found that made them think so quickly that the boy planned the attack. But now we know at least one clue. The driver received at least 15 citations, traffic tickets, including careless driving, reckless driving, driving without a license or registration, improper passing, leaving the scene of an accident with injury, abandoning a vehicle, an unsafe lane change. And frankly, those citations seemed inconsequential to me in light of 2 charges of first-degree murder, except for the last citation. That was for speeding, because the speeding ticket provided a massive clue that this was no accident. The ticket said the Jeep was going 70 miles an hour on a street where the limit is 25. I should note that it is not yet clear how the police know that the Jeep was going that fast, since presumably it wasn't caught by a radar gun. In the meantime, people who knew and loved Maria Niotis and Isabella Salas, the young victims, they're beyond convinced that those girls were targeted, Maria in particular. Friends tell New York's Pix 11 News that the suspect had stalked Maria for months, apparently wanting to date her. Sadly, even if she had sought legal protection, and some accounts say that she did, New Jersey law generally doesn't allow restraining orders against offenders who are under the age of 18. A head of a support center for victims of domestic violence explains it this way.
We'll have a client who comes to us and reports this, and she goes to the same school as her abuser, and we can't really take any steps to keep them from sitting in history class next to each other.
The 17-year-old suspect is a juvenile, and he's charged that way for now. Prosecutors have 60 days, though, to get the case moved to adult court if they so choose, and the boy turns 18 next month. Maria and Isabella will not see their 18th birthdays. Maria Niotis was laid to rest today, and Isabella Salas will be laid to rest on Monday. Coming up next, the headlines screamed the unthinkable. A former college cheerleader takes selfies while in labor and then deletes them before allegedly stashing her dead newborn in the closet of her off-campus home. We first told you about this on Monday. And if true, it would make Laken Snelling look like a monster. But there may be a very good reason she A, took the selfies, and B, deleted them. And it is not at all what you think. Stories next. To say that Laken Snelling made a lot of poor decisions is an understatement. She's the 21-year-old former college cheerleader who hid her pregnancy from her friends and her roommates and then gave birth all alone in her off-campus bedroom before showering and heading off to McDonald's. She allegedly stashed that newborn in a garbage bag inside her closet. Laken is charged with a lot of things, but homicide is not one of them. Not yet, anyway. But as we reported to you on Monday, police say that Laken took selfies while she was in labor and that, quote, the photos that were taken while she was in labor were deleted in an attempt to hide the birth. I can see how that would make a lot of people very angry, the idea of taking selfies at such a monumental time, especially considering what happened next. But before passing judgment, I thought about what else might have been happening here. A 21-year-old student is alone in labor, a terrifying prospect just in itself, and perhaps, just perhaps, she had no idea how to track what was going on, like when the baby was crowning. At about 9 months pregnant, she certainly would not have been able to see that happening with her own eyes. I've been there. Maybe Laken, as we all do on occasion, used her camera to see something that she was unable to see for herself. And maybe afterward, Laken decided that she never wanted anyone but herself to ever see that view. It's called benefit of the doubt, something that Laken will undoubtedly need, especially if prosecutors decide to charge her with murder. Before we go, just a quick note, check out my podcast, Drop Dead Serious. I have an entire set of stories on Laken Snelling. If you're just sort of catching up on that, check it out. We did a big story on that on Monday. And then also, if you've been following the David and Celeste story, I have a whole playlist on there as well. So if you're a little bit behind or you missed some things, you can check out everything from the timeline to the story to the developments to what the police have done to what her friends have said, etc. And yeah, We are still waiting to find out if David, the singer, is going to face any charges for, you know, his underage girlfriend being in his trunk dead. That's it for us. Have a great weekend. Cuomo's next.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our NewsNation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.